Hello and good morning, everyone. Welcome to another one of our Thrive Essentials functional nutrition calls with our very own functional nutritionist, Paula Nelms. Paula, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Reese, good morning. Thank you so much for having me here.
Absolutely. And I'm really excited about what you're going to be covering today. This is something I've actually started to invest a lot of time and thought into, and it's the subject I think is going to be useful for anyone that's really working on growing and improving themselves, right? So fueling mental peak performance with nutrition and lifestyle. I think that's something we could all take away from. So without further ado, Paula, I will let you take it away.
Okay, yeah. So my name is Paula, as Reese mentioned. My educational background is in nutrition and functional medicine. I'm the owner of Nelms Nutrition, which I'm located in Rockwall, but I see clients all over the Metroplex and even nationally at this point. And I am pleased to serve NeuroGlow in any way that I can. So, let's get to it. So, when we talk about fueling mental peak performance with nutrition and lifestyle, we are referring to when the brain and the mind are functioning at their best. And when that's occurring, we can expect to have improved or optimal performance in things like thinking, our focus, our attention span, our mental skills, our ability to do a lot of different things mentally, memory formation, emotional regulation, creativity, and even confidence. So this is the focus of this presentation. There are certainly a lot of different directions we could take this, but today this is what we're talking about. So, and whenever we're talking about the brain is a very interesting thing, right? So I decided to do a little trivia time here. I looked up some interesting trivia on the brain. So an adult brain weighs about 3 pounds. Think about whenever you're lifting weights and you have a 3 pound weight, how tiny that is. So the thing that is running everything you do, all of your internal processes, all of your ability to interact with the external environment is done by a 3 pound thing. So it's only 3 pounds, but it uses 20% of our total energy. The human brain contains 86 billion neurons. When I say neurons, I'm referring to brain cells. That's what they're called. And there are 1,000 trillion brain cell connections. So those connections are connecting all of the brain cells together so they can communicate. So brain tissue the size of a grain of sand contains about 100,000 neurons. That absolutely blows my mind.
Ah,
Um, Info in the brain can travel up to 350 miles per hour. So think really quick processing speed. The brain kills it. The hippocampus, that is a part of the brain that's really important for making memories. It takes, short-term memories, consolidates them into long-term. That part of the brain, the hippocampus, continues to make neurons throughout our entire life. There was a long time where we thought the brain did not regenerate at all, but more research in the last few decades has shown that the hippocampus does continue to make neurons. And that makes sense because it is such an important part of brain function. So the brain is fully developed by the mid to late 20s. That's why teenagers and young adults tend to make quite a few bad decisions and not even realize that they're making bad decisions. Neurons in the brain, spinal cord, and body, they are designed to last your entire lifetime. So I didn't really know this. I mean, it makes sense, but I learned this just this week. But however, having said that, we lose about 85,000 neurons per day. That is a very sobering fact for me. That's a huge number. And last little trivia I'd love to put on here. It is technically impossible to multitask. I always thought until recently we could multitask, just work on tons of different things at a time, be very effective. And research really shows us that it is technically impossible. And so it's better to just focus on one thing at a time. You're going to have the best performance and the best engagement. Do you have any questions about any of these, Reese?
You know that the what you mentioned about the brain actually generating new neurons, that was something that I was not aware of, right? And
Oh,
definitely understood the when I was younger, you think as, you think by the time you're in college, early 20s, you just think you've got it all figured out, right? And not understanding that that frontal lobe is not fully developed until your mid to late 20s. That's something that I mean, you
right.
think about it afterwards, right? But it's like, oh yeah, it all makes sense. So,
Yeah.
well, the whole reason we're here and working ourselves is, a lot of this is cognitive, right? It has to do with our brain,
Mhm.
and so I'm glad that we're talking about this and what we can do to take care of it because, yeah, I didn't realize it was spending 20% of your total energy either.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
pretty incredible.
So I did the math. My brain weighs about 0.2% of my entire weight, but takes up 20% of my energy reserves.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
incredible.
Very powerful thing. And females, I love this part. Females, their brains tend to fully develop earlier than males. So, you know, take that however you want to. Okay, so now let's talk about. Oh, no, here's another. This isn't really trivia. This is more what we see in the research. So I searched out at what ages do mental abilities tend to peak in humans? And some of this is kind of depressing, some of it not so much. Our information processing speed, think about that 350 mile per hour processing speed, that peaks at the late teens, between the ages of 18 and 19. And at that age, we don't even know how important this is. And by the time we realize it, it's just gone. Short-term memory tends to peak between the ages of 25 and 35. Memory for faces tends to peak at about the age of 30. Emotional understanding peaks between the 40s and 50s. Vocabulary tends to peak in the 60s. And this last one really isn't a surprise, but accumulated factual knowledge peaks in the 60s and 70s. And of course it would, because now we have a whole life of learning, right?
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. On that on that first one there, Paula, the informational processing speed is something. My son is a gamer and
Yeah.
tells me all about this, but there's a whole realm of these professional gamers that by the time they're in their early 20s, they are retiring and coaching. They're no longer competitively gaming because the just
Wow.
nanoseconds of
Mm.
neuron firing or that slowdown of that informational processing speed at that elite level, it's measurable, it's known. And so there's a short lifespan of these people in this of their career as a competitive gamer. I thought that was fascinating.
That is fascinating. That's kind of like the lifespan of a gymnast, you know?
Yeah.
That stuff just peaks early, and then after that, it's just a slow, gradual decline.
Yes.
Given that you take care of your brain. Okay, so now let's talk about ways that we can take of the brain that can boost our peak optimal performance. So, number one, eating a healthy diet. That's probably the biggest tool you have at your disposal to improve your overall health, especially the brain. Number two, improving blood flow to the brain. There are things you can do that help with that. Number three, improving your brain cell membrane health. We're going to talk about that quite a bit. Number four, providing nutrients for proper neurotransmitter synthesis. We're not going to talk about all the neurotransmitters, but we're going to talk about four of the ones that are most commonly known and talk about the nutrients that really help with that. Number five, maintaining a healthy weight. Super important for the brain. Number six, getting enough sleep. This is going to be right there with nutrition. Sleep is a huge game changer for brain health. Number seven, make sure you poop every day. I'm a good nutritionist, and so we love to talk about poop, and it is extremely important. And number eight, managing stress. Stress has a horrible effect on the brain if it's not kept in check. Okay, so with all that said, number one, eating a healthy diet. We spent the last webinar really taking a deep dive into what a healthy diet looks like. So I'm not going to revisit all of that. But for the most part, and this doesn't have to be a perfect dietary intake, just mostly following a diet like this, having lots of multicolored fruits and veggies, herbs and spices, whole grains rather than refined grains, beans, legumes, and peas, nuts, seeds, lean protein, eggs, fatty fish, healthy fats, and olive oil. So those are, and that's basically the Mediterranean diet, right? So then we see that you're going to have better brain health if you limit the amount of fried foods you're having, processed, those ultra processed foods, they have no nutrients. And having a big intake of sugary foods and beverages, that has a very deleterious effect on the brain. And so the reason we want to have a good diet, over there on the right hand uh, side of the slide, you're going to see having a healthier diet, you're going to have a lot more vitamins, minerals, protein, healthy fats, fiber, antioxidants, and flavonoids coming in. So yeah, this is going to be your lowest hanging fruit, your most powerful tool for brain health. And so when we look at research on three different dietary patterns, we see that probably, we've already touched on this, the Mediterranean diet is going to be your most powerful tool. Research has shown, and these are longitudinal studies over, like 4 to 8 years, people that followed a Mediterranean diet, these were healthy populations, people that did not have brain dysfunction. They had a 72% lower risk for developing dementia within that time period of study. There's also this diet called the Mediterranean DASH diet intervention for neurodegenerative delay. So what that is they have taken the Mediterranean diet, combined it with the DASH diet that's often used for high blood pressure, and so this diet is very similar to the Mediterranean diet, but it has a greater emphasis on things like berries, leafy greens, nuts, salmon. They're going to want you to eat most of that daily, except salmon. That's going to be like 1 to 2 times per week. People that followed the MIND diet had a 53% lower risk for dementia over the period of time that it was studied. So now, if we're talking about populations that already have mild cognitive impairment, dementia, or Alzheimer's, we see that the ketogenic diet, which is a high fat, low carbohydrate, moderate protein diet, ketogenic diet is going to be your best bet. When we have brain impairment, dementia, and Alzheimer's, we see a lot of insulin resistance in the brain. And what I mean by that is the brain cells are damaged and they're not able to use glucose from our carbohydrates as well. The brain cells don't use it as well for energy, but to a certain extent, the brain cells can utilize a higher fat content in the diet for energy. They can burn the fat. That's called beta oxidation. That's the brain cells using fat for energy. That buys people with these cognitive impairments, it buys them a little bit of time. But research hasn't really shown how much time yet. I mean, yeah, we know the brain cells become insulin resistant. They don't use glucose as much. How long can they actually use the fat for energy, though? So that remains a huge question, but it's a huge recommendation when I see clients that are starting to have cognitive impairment or some, diagnosed disease. Do you have any questions about this?
You know, the I had, been somewhat familiar with the Mediterranean diet, Paula, but it's really interesting to know that people dealing with these symptoms or already have some of these impairments that you could slow down
Mhm.
that, the effects of that condition solely by diet, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what you're eating is, it is metabolized by your cells. So if it's taken up, it is used to do all of the processes in your body. So if you have kind of a crummy diet with not a lot of nutrients, you're not giving your cells a whole lot to work with. When you have those really nutrient dense foods, that allows them to function really well and even prosper and become optimal in their function.
Yeah, as we talk about all this, Paula, I think about being a child in the 90s and having boomer parents and the convenience of fast food and that whole I'm having to relearn everything and the food pyramid
Yes.
and all the misinformation that I was fed for decades, right? Uh,
Yes.
And I'm sure there's many people that are on that same journey and being more intentful, not only about, yeah, what I'm putting in my body, but why. That is a huge focus for me as I sneak up into my 40s here before too long. And it's just something I never thought of, before, but I definitely appreciate and understand the value of it, especially with like, Alzheimer's and kind of cognitive issues running in my family. These are things that are very important to me.
Absolutely. They run in mine too, very strongly genetically. So we are doing what we can with our family to optimize all this. So maybe later on, I mean, maybe we're genetically set up for it, but genetics do not have the last word. There are powerful tools we have to modulate their expression and to change how they're
Yeah.
going to function. Yeah. Okay, so there's healthy diet. There's number one. Number two, I love this one. Improving blood flow to the brain. The best way to do that, the most powerful tool you have is to get your heart pumping through aerobic exercise. Weightlifting, strength training, it can help to a certain extent, but it doesn't really, unless it's really hard for you, it really doesn't get the heart pumping as much. And you want more pumping that's going to push more blood into the brain, into the cells. And when we have more blood coming in, we have more oxygen and we have more nutrients that have hitched a ride in the blood, right? To the brain, and they're getting to those brain cells more effectively. So, by aerobic exercise, I mean brisk walking, jogging, running, cycling, swimming, rowing, high intensity interval training, better known as HIIT. That is potentially one of the top ones to improve blood flow. It is the name implies, though, it is a very intense form of exercise. So, and you can go to different areas in town and find different places that offer HIIT. Some of them offer, easier ones, some are more challenging. So, a lot of variation there, but that's probably going to be your best bet. CrossFit is another one. CrossFit tends to be really hard on the body. So with my older clients, I tend to steer them away from CrossFit. And then things like power yoga. If it's really hard for you, if you are adding weights to it, I do a form of yoga called iron yoga, where there's a lot of cardio in it and we use weights in all of the postures and in the flows. And so that gets my heart pumping like you wouldn't believe. Um, Foods that will help that can accompany but not replace aerobic exercise would be things like beets, berries, leafy greens, citrus fruits, onions, walnuts, salmon, and other forms of fatty fish. And so there at the bottom, I had another interesting thing that regular aerobic exercise will do. It will cause increases in this protein called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, better known as BDNF. You'll see it a lot when you start reading about the brain. And so when you have improvements there, you literally have growth in the brain. You have improved neuroplasticity. The brain cells are communicating better. The brain tends to go through some rewiring for that, better connections. And the brain cells are talking to each other a little bit easier. So this is one of my favorite ways to really improve the brain, right up there with nutrition.
Yes. Yeah, this is one of the things, often when we are working with our clients at NeuroGlow and they're starting this kind of journey to work on themselves and their mental health, that's something that I have personally and just seen time and time again, just adding some activity and getting out there the
Absolutely.
right and inherently if you are walking in the sunlight, that's like okay, that's solving some other things
That's
that
better.
your brain is even wanting, right? So cannot
Yeah.
do that enough. That's been a
Yeah.
huge shift for me, Paula, in my life in the last 2 or 3 years. Removing alcohol from my life, becoming more active. Now I'm working with a trainer, a strength trainer, and doing the high intensity interval training, right? And
Excellent.
the calorie burn was the big gain for me on that, is that, by bringing your heart rate up and down, that you seem to get, more lasting effects from it. But all of
Abs-
these things, there's no silver bullet to mental health, right? It's this formula that you have to be so intentional about with what
Right.
you're putting in your body, what you're doing with your body, and really taking care of yourself so that you can perform at those levels.
Exactly. And you don't have to go from 0 to 100. If you are not doing physical activity right now, a great goal to set is next week, I'm going to work out once. Which
Yeah,
way do I like to work out? Figure out what you like to do. People aren't as successful long term with this if they're trying to do something they don't enjoy. Okay.
100%.
If people hate running, you're not going to get them running.
Yeah. Oh, with my knees, you will not catch me running, but I will walk miles. Do
Yeah.
you wear like a Fitbit or a Whoop or some kind of trackable to measure your fitness or your health KPIs? Paula, what do you use?
So I used to do an Apple Watch until I dropped it on my tile and it broke. And I decided not to replace it.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
I do one of those too, and it's been incredible for me in terms of the insight on physical activity, emotion, and standing. You know, being behind a desk all the time is not great. I can as
No.
someone who's had an artificial disc replaced in the base of their spine, I can
Mhm.
tell you, like sitting all day is not great, right? So like at the very baseline, just getting up, stretching, that kind of stuff can go a long way. And that the Apple Watch, all the health metrics seem to be very, very helpful for that kind of
Oh
stuff.
yeah, they send you those little reminders. They can be shame inducing if you can't
Yeah,
get up. But it's like time to stand up. You've been sitting
right.
too long. And so a lot of times I'll use a standing desk for video calls and virtual consults.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen you do that.
Yeah, I really like my standing desk. I didn't have access to it today, but that's a one way to just get off your butt and
Mm.
move a little bit. And then you can take those breaks like once an hour, once every other hour. You can set a timer and say, I'm gonna get up and walk around the house. You could do some loaded carries. You could carry some heavy things through the house. That'll get the heart pumping a little better. And then setting up that time, as often as you can to get regular exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Thing that blood flow too, Paula. I don't think you mentioned it on there, but something I've become accustomed to. I don't have the cold plunge by any means, but it starts to get colder this time of year in the morning at the end of my shower. I will do a 2 or 3 minute as ice cold and try to work
Yeah.
that. But what it does, it pulls all that blood into into your core and recirculates it out. And that's
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
a measurable thing for me that really helps me kind of wake up and get moving in the morning.
So it does that, but it also, if you do the cold immersion for long enough, that causes you to grow new mitochondria, which
Yeah,
it'll increase your basal metabolic rate and lead to greater energy production.
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's super awesome. But I don't like being cold, so I don't do that. I increase my mitochondria through other means. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Right here, this is one of my favorites. So, improving our brain cell membrane health. Do you know much about your cell membranes, Reese?
Not really. No.
Okay, good. Okay, so here we have a cute little picture of a neuron. That's what a brain cell looks like in its totality. And so it is surrounded by a membrane, an outer thing that protects it, covers it. The membrane allows communication with different neurotransmitters and hormones. The hormones will dock with that membrane and tell the cells what to do. They can tell the brain cells what to do. Same with neurotransmitters. They will dock with the membranes and tell them what to do. And with that, you can have better cell to cell communication. You can have better communication from the cell with remote sites in the body. Keep in mind, everything is connected. And this allows better nutrient absorption when your brain cell membranes are optimized. So, what they are made of, so you've got the cute little picture of the neuron there, and I've got an arrow pointing to a blown up, very simplified picture of a cell membrane. So you see things like carbohydrates. They stick up off of the cell membrane. They are really involved in communication and signaling. You have cholesterol inside your cell membrane. You have proteins all along the cell membrane that allow the hormones and different things to communicate. Those proteins allow nutrients to enter the cells. And then I have circled in red this thing called phospholipids. So phospho refers to phosphate, phosphorus. Phosphorus is an element, okay? Lipids, that refers to fats. So you'll notice that the majority of the cell membrane is composed of fats and phosphates. So those fats, believe it or not, the fats that you eat in your diet determine what that cell membrane is going to be made of. Did you know that?
I did not.
It's really interesting, and it gives us a certain degree of control over how well our membranes are working, and that in turn, that will determine how well those cells communicate with other parts of the body. Okay, so now let's talk about which types of fats. So we want optimally, ultimately, we want those cell membranes to be very flexible, very fluid. They kind of go with the flow, right? So different fats that help with more flexibility are going to be your monounsaturated fats. Examples of that would be olive oil, avocados, nuts, and eggs. Then we've got polyunsaturated omega-3 fats. That's going to be your fish oils, which most people are familiar with. Those fats are going to be EPA and DHA. Don't ask me to pronounce what those stand for. It's really difficult to pronounce it. Anyway, it's just your fish oils. You get them in really big amounts in salmon, tuna, things like that. So yeah, examples of that would be fatty fish, walnuts, flax seeds, flaxseed oil, chia seeds, and edamame, better known as soybeans. So those are the types of fats that make the membrane more flexible. Then you've got vitamin E. We hear a lot about vitamin E. It is a very powerful antioxidant that is stationed in the cell membranes. So whenever you've got things like oxidative stress in the cell membrane, damage from a lot of the metabolic processes, vitamin E can come in and help neutralize that and decrease the amount of damage. It's very powerful. Foods that are high in vitamin E include nuts, seeds, wheat germ, leafy greens, and salmon. And so we talked about the healthy fats that make the cell membranes flexible. Now let's talk about unhealthier fats that make them more stiff and more rigid. And so that's going to be foods that have a lot of saturated fat. And so people I'm not afraid of saturated fat. I have a certain extent that I eat in my diet, but I try to limit it and reduce it as much as possible. So examples of saturated fatty foods would be like butter and coconut oil and cheese, beef, fried foods, ice cream, processed baked goods. This could be a very, very long list. One of the things on this list, though, that I'm not terribly worried about is going to be coconut oil. They have done studies that they've shown it can be nearly as beneficial to the brain as olive oil. They've done direct studies and definitely outshines butter when it comes to the health of them. So, this is all about the cell membranes. And over under monounsaturated fats, where I have olive oil, there is this molecule in olive oil called oleocanthal. I think that's how it's pronounced. It actually can remove beta amyloid plaques from the brain that tend to accumulate when you have Alzheimer's disease.
Ooh,
So,
very in-
olive oil is one of the healthiest things you can put in your body.
Yes. Yeah, I follow a lot of the longevity and wellness kind of biohacker community, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
Brian Johnson, who's one of the kind of emerging guys in that space,
Yeah.
I believe he says a good percent, like I think half of his caloric intake a day is olive oil. That's
Yeah.
how emphatic, some of these people are becoming about it. And so
Yeah.
this is very useful. And obviously, saturated fats, we're all, maybe not all, but I am certainly guilty of enjoying all these things, and having moderation around it is huge, right?
my gosh. Yeah, I'll have butter about once a week when I have eggs on the weekend. Cheese, I love cheese. So I'll have about one serving of cheese per day.
Yeah.
But the other things I really try to limit with cell membrane health in mind.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. And of course, they have an effect on so many other things. But today we're talking about the brain. Okay, here are so number four, providing nutrients for proper neurotransmitter synthesis. This is a really big deal in the functional nutrition community. So, four of the neurotransmitters that most people have heard of, there on the left, we have serotonin. Below it, we have dopamine. Over on the right, we have acetylcholine. And then below that, we have GABA. Each of these is involved to a certain extent in mood, our ability to learn, our ability to make memories, to pull memories, to sleep. And serotonin is even involved in GI motility, which helps with pooping, which we're going to get to here in just a minute. So, one of the nutrients, the most powerful nutrient that helps with serotonin production is going to be tryptophan. It's an amino acid. Most of us have heard of that. With dopamine, those essential nutrient cofactors are going to be tyrosine and magnesium. You've got to have these in order to make these neurotransmitters. For acetylcholine, its precursor is going to be good old choline. And with GABA, that's our really, so it's a little bit different than the others. It's involved in calming the brain and the nervous system as a whole. It helps promote relaxation when it is activated, and it helps promote sleep. And so, a huge precursor, essential nutrient cofactor for GABA is going to be glutamine. And so you can see under each of these the therapeutic foods that are really high in these specific nutrients. I want you to notice that there are certain things that show up on multiple lists. We've got pumpkin seeds showing up on multiple lists. We have eggs. Eggs show up on actually every single of these lists. Nuts show up on most of them. Salmon, I believe, it's on all four of these lists. And then you've got things like oats and avocados and crucifer vegetables. Those are going to be broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kale, all of those guys. Shiitake mushrooms, edamame, yogurt. So these are going to be really great therapeutic foods to help with neurotransmitter synthesis, balance, and regulation. Yeah. Okay.
Very cool.
Yeah. So number five, maintaining a healthy weight. So have you ever thought about when you think about brain health, have you ever thought about that keeping a healthy weight is going to be a necessary component of it?
As I've learned more, it has become more front of mind, but it did not, I did not inherently think about that. But as someone that's really struggled with visceral fat and inflammation,
Hmm.
particularly when I still drink alcohol and when I ate worse. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I've learned so much more about this and the dangers of having that visceral fat around your organs, your vital organs. That's something that's become much more front of mind for me now. So I'd love for you to share more on this.
Yeah, so the visceral fat is extremely metabolically active, believe it or not. Our subcutaneous fat that is under the skin, like on the arms and the legs, that is not as metabolically active. Now, they are showing in research recently that it's more metabolically active than we thought. But visceral fat is like its own active endocrine organ. So there are a lot of hormones that get involved there. As visceral fat increases and expands, there's going to be a lot of debris in those cells. And so when there's a lot of debris, the immune system tries to come in and clean it up. The immune system is always trying to clean things up, make them better. And so when that visceral fat is just sitting there for years on end, the immune system gets extremely involved. The visceral fat actually sends messages to the immune system to get involved. Then the immune system gets there and it sends more messages to other immune cells for them to come get involved. And so then it's just this inflamed mess. So that's what happens with this. And the visceral fat, as you alluded to, it is the fat that's stored around those abdominal organs. So, research has shown that it is associated with impaired executive function overall, reduced focus and attention span, reduced mental processing speed, poor memory, but not able to recall things as well, brain fog. And if you have it for long enough at high enough levels, it's going to increase your risk for dementia and potentially Alzheimer's later on. Okay. Number six, get enough sleep. This has been huge for me. I used to be one of those that would ride around on about 5 or 6 hours sleep, and I was a mess, not very effective at my work, couldn't think as well. The last several months, I have really been prioritizing sleep, and it has been an absolute game changer in my abilities overall. So it is recommended to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. That's going to be different for everyone. And benefits of sleep, when we're sleeping, the brain actually goes to work to do a lot of repair. It will clear out old debris, get rid of toxins and wastes. It will make new connections between brain cells. It will help balance out and regulate neurotransmitter levels. It helps with memory consolidation. Things that you learned that day when you're sleeping, they are consolidated better into long-term memories. When we're sleeping, we are also clearing out plaques and tangles, those beta amyloid plaques and those tau tangles that are the huge hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. And so overall, having enough sleep can have protective effects against depression and anxiety and other mood disorders.
So this is, one more shout out to the kind of health trackers and sleep trackers,
Hmm. Hmm.
not
Yeah.
just length of sleep, but quality of sleep, right? And being able to get into a deep sleep, which is an area where I noticed where I really needed to pay some attention to that, right? And
Hmm.
you mentioned that detoxing of the brain, right? Those fluids is what your lymphatic system is what it's called,
Yes.
right?
Yes, it
So
is.
in your deep sleep is when that cleansing of your brain, the fluid in your brain can be kind of cleansed out.
Yeah.
That being able to get into deep sleep and get meaningful deep sleep is huge for your
Yeah.
cognitive function and brain repair, right? And I'm, as a parent with young kids and having the late nights and early mornings, and you can really feel it after a while, that wear down and that fatigue. And so that's something that, again, when we're working on wellness and our own, kind of development, personal health, a lot of times with depression, a lot of issues with sleep, quality of sleep kind of are derived from that. So, and thinking
Absolutely.
about that, doing what you can to set yourself up for a healthy night of sleep, limiting
Yeah.
the tech before, right? I know there's a million studies on that. Uh,
Right.
the 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 measured impact that blue light, your phone, the LED, the blue light that it emits. I saw a study that was like from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. In that window, it's measurably more harmful for your brain to process that blue LED because your
Mm-hmm.
brain is trying to go to sleep and rest, and this is not
Yes,
conducive
it
to that.
is. It's
So,
begging, and we just work against it.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So,
I
yeah,
actually have some amazing information on sleep. I mean, we could do a whole webinar on all of the things that affect sleep, things you can do to improve it. And I mean, it is a lot of information. I would love to share that with the NeuroGlow community.
that'd be great. I think it's one of the probably most overlooked, like easily addressable things when we look at like wellness and optimization, that usually everybody has some area where they could improve, right?
Oh my gosh, yes. And sleep, I have to tell you, I've been at my job about 2.5 years now. I've had one client ever that walked in my office and said, I sleep great.
Right.
I have
Yes.
no issues. I had her last week and I almost fell on the floor.
Sure.
Yeah.
We talk about that consolidation of memories that happen, and like there's things you will retain from your day, and there's it's just so much is happening during that time, right?
Gosh,
Your ability to
yes.
process all that and your REM sleep. And so we should
Yeah.
definitely do a session on that in the future.
I would love to do that because
Cool.
it's so very important and everybody suffers from it, me included. I was awake overnight from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. thinking about all the things that I had no control over. Okay.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of improvements that can be made with sleep for sure. Okay, so here we are at number seven, one of my favorite topics. Make sure you are pooping every day or at least every day, or at least almost every day. Studies have shown that constipated individuals, with constipation, we're talking about people that poop maybe once every 2 to 3 days. They had worse measures on cognitive function, just global cognitive function. And they compared them with people that do poop once a day. They had better measures of brain function on the same measures. And this probably comes down to some people in the functional medicine space believe that if you're not pooping enough, the toxins, those metabolized toxins that the body wants to get rid of, they are just sitting there in the colon. They are interacting with the microbiome that's in the colon. That's where the majority of our gut microbiome is. And that some people even believe that they can be reactivated in some ways, they can re-enter circulation. I tend to believe that some things can. We have proven that hormones can. Metabolized hormones can be reactivated if they're sitting there long enough, which is crazy. Other forms of toxins, I'm not so sure about. Research is still, we're still on the fence about that. But what everyone can agree on, the longer that it sits in the colon, it's interacting with that gut microbiome, all of those gut bugs, the gut bacteria that have great health benefits if they are in a healthy balance. When you've got poop sitting there in there for extended periods of time, it tends to shift that gut microbiome to a more pathogenic expression. And so then the gut, of course, is connected to the brain. Most of our serotonin runs through our gut. A lot of other neurotransmitters run through the gut. So there is a direct connection with the brain. That's why. And so those pathogenic signals are sent back to the brain. It can cause a lot of health issues, mental health issues. And so there are ways, another thing I commonly see is people are not pooping every day. So I have, that nutrition is going to be your most powerful tool on that. But there are also some supplements you can add. The trinity for pooping is going to be more fiber, more water, more movement. That works for the majority of people, but not everyone. I do have clients that are harder cases, and we have to work a little bit harder at it.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Last thing, managing stress. So I was able, there's not actually a lot of research on this, not good research, but I was able to find one study. It was a longitudinal study. Um, Individuals, these were Black and white individuals drawn from all over the United States. The ones that had the highest, they rated their perceived stress the highest. They had a 30% increased risk for cognitive decline to begin after the age of 45. And so how they tested them, it was just global cognitive status tests. I think they could have done a better job with this, but they tested them on word recall and how they were oriented to the year, month, day of the week, things like that. But they were actually able to detect that their cognition was declining with higher stress. And
Yes.
so, stress reduction techniques, that this could be an extremely long list, and people have to find what works for them. But, you can look through that meditation, yoga, progressive muscle relaxation, deep breathing, mindfulness, physical activity. We've already talked about how important that is. Spending time with people that don't stress you out. That's going to be a huge one. Listening to music, getting everything into planners where you're not laying awake all night thinking about all the things you have to do. Journaling, gratitude lists, those can be great for reducing stress. Having a pet that you love and praying. If you're a religious person, a spiritual person, praying can be very powerful for stress reduction.
Yeah, I don't think we often don't give that enough of a focus is being able to and especially for me at the end of a day, being an entrepreneur, being a father, being a husband, being able to wind down and be intentional about kind of
Mhm.
getting your brain in a state that's going to be conducive to not only going to sleep, but having good quality of sleep. And
Right.
I will say the mindful breathing exercises I've integrated into my life in the last year or two have been very helpful, immeasurably helpful. You can see your blood pressure and your metrics before and after, the
Absolutely.
all the fitness trackers out there. So if you have not incorporated those into your life or feel the burden of that kind of stress, I highly recommend, exploring some of these avenues to um, be able to get that bad energy off you.
Right, right. And you can. There are ways. I have spent the last year of my life in therapy almost weekly, and that has been extremely helpful for lowering perceived stress and really bringing into focus what do I actually have control over?
Yeah,
And let me just worry about that and do what I can to make it to where I don't have to worry about it anymore. Get some sort of resolution with it and then letting the rest of it go. That's been
sure.
huge for me. Yeah. Okay. So
Cool.
the last slide, I think this is the last slide. Um, a lot of my clients really love supplements. I think supplements have a very important part in a nutritional and lifestyle plan. Will they work if you don't meet them with nutrition and physical activity and lifestyle improvements? They may work a little bit, but it's going to be limited. They tend to work better synergistically when you're making other improvements as well. And so here I have supplements for improving blood flow. That was one of the things we covered, improving blood flow. Supplements for improving cell membranes. I've got a few ideas there. Olive oil is going to be one of the best ones. Those omega-3 fatty acids, if you can get them from diet, it's even better. If you can eat salmon, a lot better than taking a supplement. Um, Under the picture, I have supplements for brain cell survival, repair, rewiring, growth, neuroplasticity, things like lion's mane, coffee berry, urolithin A. Those can really go in and repair the cells and make them work better. Um, Supplements for regulating neurotransmitter levels. I have quite a few options there. There's your NAD plus. It tends to work for a few different things, right? But it really
Sure.
helps. I was looking at research on it, yesterday. How does it exactly help with the brain?
Right. Yeah.
It helps with neurotransmitter levels, but it can also help with, cell production, energy production. It helps in a lot of different
And
areas.
the mental focus, the mental fog reduction
Mhm.
was measurable for me. For those in the audience that are not familiar with the NAD plus is IV therapy. There's also a patch modality that we offer uh,
Mhm.
that is awesome in this regard. So it's something to check out.
Absolutely. And doing the IV infusion is going to be a lot more powerful than just doing a supplement. It
Absolutely.
really is. The research is quite different between the two. And then so supplements for improving brain cell energy production. I've got some listed there. Acetyl L-carnitine is amazing. Remember, we were talking about Alzheimer's disease, how a ketogenic diet, burning fats for fuel is really helpful. Acetyl L-carnitine helps facilitate burning fats for fuel in the brain. So lots of options here. Would I recommend that everyone go out and buy all of these and take all of them all at one time? Absolutely not. You would be wasting your money. You could have a lot of adverse effects. And if you add a lot of things at once, you don't know what caused the adverse effect, right? You don't know what to take away. So I would say, food first, improve physical activity to the best that you can and add some supplements when they are indicated. NeuroGlow is offering micronutrient testing. And so that's a way to look at your levels of different nutrients. A lot of these nutrients on here that you see are measured in that micronutrient test. And you can do the test and say, oh my gosh, I'm deficient in this nutrient. Who knew? And that would allow for targeted supplementation.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
So that's all I've got, Reese.
This was so helpful. Thank you so much for your time today, Paula.
Oh,
Uh,
you're so welcome. It's my pleasure.
Yeah. We do have so many kind of ways where we can continue on in this conversation. We will send out some opportunities for our Thrive members to check out future sessions. Actually, it may be a good way to kind of segue and wrap that up. I think what our next realm of content is going to be looking like, some of the testing that Paula mentioned there, we do a cellular micronutrient testing as well as a DNA healthy aging report. And these
Hmm.
are very useful reports that will show you how your body is processing nutrients, and then on the DNA healthy aging, kind of how your body genetically is predisposed to be doing these things, right? But
Yes.
we're actually going to go through a round of sessions where we're going to review my findings from my personal tests. Then I'm going to be going on a round of supplements, and then we're going to follow up with that here in a few months and see what
Mhm.
kind of measurable differences we've had there. So stay tuned for that. We will send some more information out. I want to thank every one of our Thrive members for being part of this program and taking the time to work on themselves and their wellness. And Paula, thank you so much for your time as well.
Thank
We will
you.
be back next month with another exciting session. And until then, hope you guys enjoy the cooler weather and have a great Thanksgiving, a great Halloween, and we will see you next month. All right. Take care.
Yes, yes.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.